we've mentioned here Gary Vee and Mari and Guy. I've had recently the opportunity to pitch some of these big names, which I think are huge, but the mainstream media are still not biting on them, and they don't understand. I can't get some of these guys arrested on the morning shows. So the shift hasn't happened quite yet into mainstream. It is, but I get so insular thinking everybody knows who these people are, but they don't, which always surprises me.
Sven, you had a question, a point?
I think it's also this infrastructure. I mean, I think as an individual brand, you have to be a lot smarter about it. So I think it's just infrastructure, but as a personal brand, you normally have to be a lot smarter about your time and how you exercise this. Some of these bigger brands, you're talking about individual brands, have teams behind them that basically do research. Sometimes they actually do the tweeting for them. And that's also, I think, a big difference between when you talk about personal brands. There are some personal brands where they are actually actively doing it themselves, and they're the ones where they basically just put the face up and the name, and this is the team behind it.
Good.
That's actually, I was going to say, a really good point, and something that is a fun, controversial topic to stir the pot a little bit. But that is one of the biggest differences that you're going to find between, I'm going to say, a brand that has the finances versus an individual person who's trying to manage an account on their own. Most of us, we could create really a large online brand under our own name. Chris Brogan, Scott Stratton, who's at Unmarketing, all do it themselves. Yes, they have assistants that help them answer their emails, things like that, but they publicly talk as themselves. Whereas you look at someone more like Guy, who has outwardly said that he doesn't do it all himself. He can't do it all himself. But that doesn't take away from his brand. You look at someone like Scott Monty, who manages Ford's social media, but he has a team behind him that does a lot of the research. He just happens to be the face of the brand. But because he has other people doing the research, it doesn't take away from the brand itself, as long as the brand as a whole, whether it's an individual face of the brand or a company face of the brand, as long as the brand stays consistent, and were you to call that brand, call that person, you'd have the same conversation. I think having others help with the research just shows that you've reached a level where you can have that help. Anyone have some thoughts on, others helping you with social media strategies?
Well, I have, I guess, just an observation. I did a blog post about a case study I found. IBM claims to have made and found sales leads and sales prospects using social media. And they were asking him how they did this. It was an interview. And the guy said they have a name for it. I forget the name now. It's like social media. It's a volunteer position. Wow. It's not paid. They take salespeople, lead gen people, telemarketing people. They pull them off and they assign them to monitor the Twitter streams, that, to look for the, and they claim that they're jumping in and finding really quality leads. And so I thought that was fascinating. I got the reference for that at my, can I pitch my blog?
Yeah, let us know where it is.
It's a small company, bigimage.com. And anyway, so I just thought that was pretty interesting, because here they're not paying anybody. Obviously Toyota had its crisis, so they, cha-ching. But I just thought this was, talk about, a big brand or any brand. Take a customer service person, take anybody who can write a good email, who's good on the phone. That's social media, right? It's just taking what you do one-on-one and teaching them how to broadcast, or we don't use broadcast anymore, but share.
Well, I like the word communicate. I think social media are new communication channels, particularly when you're talking about small personal brands. I'm dealing with real estate agents who are generally themselves or a very small team, and they themselves make up the brand. And so I try to say, look, you might not be wanting to actively even create content, but using these tools to monitor and engage and have conversations builds relationship. And if you view them as an extension of our communication channels and taking what you do offline online, and vice versa, those contacts that you're making online and bringing them offline, that has a lot of social media success for small individual brands.
Raise of hands, how many of you guys have actually used Twitter to monitor a specific or a couple specific search terms related to your business? To actually see the conversations that's going on under search terms. For those who have done it, have you found it to be successful to be able to start conversations overall? Okay. So for those who haven't done it, that's just a quick, tip to try when you get home. TweetDeck, Hootsuite, any of the tools that you use, or just search.twitter.com. You can search for keywords that are specific to your business, and you can even use like a long tail phrase. So if you're looking within a specific area, that's going to allow you to see what the conversation is. And I'm not saying jump in and start trying to sales pitch people, but at the same time monitor what the conversation is going around the keywords in your business, and that's for individual people as well as large product brands.
One thing I want to build on that really quick is there was a book written 11 years ago now called Cluetrain Manifesto. And if you haven't read that, it's about businesses evolving and empowering their employees to be the voice of the company. And that's exactly what IBM did. And I think if you're looking to work for a large company, I think that's an important thing to look for. Does the company allow you to have a voice? And what's great is they don't pay people to do that, but by empowering the employees to be the voice of the company, that takes it to a completely new level. It takes the company to a new level. I think that's fascinating.
Yeah. No, I think that's spot on what you just said. And to the point of the question about the paradigm shift, I would say that based on that, paradigm shift is not complete until all companies have empowered all of their employees to do exactly what you just said. And so to the extent that companies still block their employees from using Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter at work, that means there has not been a paradigm shift yet until all companies allow that. I completely agree.
Only company who has a valid reason to block Twitter and Facebook is our government, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of industries that have legal regulations against these things. The healthcare industry, the finance industry. We're always going to have lawyers.
But if they're not discussing, that's actually a good point. But if they're not discussing private business information, if they're doing it more as just having conversation, that really is where social media's allowed us to be. We can network.
There are adverse reporting requirements, but that means you have to educate your employees and train them.
Well, because what has happened that industry cannot contain or control, the paradigm shift that happened is that the consumers are now a global village. We now have the opportunity to have conversations with massive amounts of people on an intimate level on whether or not we enjoy, appreciate, or dislike any particular business, service, or product. And so the consumer has been completely empowered, and that shift has taken place.
That's right.
And the companies are still very, very far behind.
It's someone over here.
Back over here.
My name is Paul June. I don't think, and when you take a look at the paradigm shift, and I take a look at social media like a product, and if you take a look at it as a life cycle of where are you in the revolution, revolution's still happening. You start to break it down demographically, you start taking a look at by age groups, you're still at the beginning of the revolution. I'm constantly running into people going, I want to be in social media. But I stop and ask them why. You've each brought up really valid points of why you're in social media. One of the number one things when I'm working with clients is I talk to them about goals and objectives. You got to do one thing, you have to do it well. So what's it going to be? You're asking people to participate, and that's what social media is all about. So let the revolution continue.
So there's a sentiment that it is actually that we are still shifting. Contrary to
it's just a start.
It's not just the government that's stopping people. There is, from Lockheed Martin, which is tied into, take from the government side and start branching out to every one of their vendors that have not really accepted it yet, and they're trying to figure out a way to work around.
Now, I do want to pose a question back to everybody, including the panelists. So back to the point. I'm sorry, your name? Paul. So those are great points. And Eric, your last name?
Eric
Forst. Okay. So great points on all of these things. My question back to the group is, how much of all of this, when we talk about the changes going on in an organization, regulatory changes, regulatory barriers, even corporate barriers to social media and so on, and when the workforce, or people in the product groups, and even in the product design phase, and I've got a follow-up question on the product design phase of all of this, but as social media starts permeating through the organization, and we're trying to get people understood and how that whole culture works and how you leverage all of that, how much of that, this is my question, how much of that is specific to social media, and how much of that is an organizational change kind of an issue? And here's why I ask that. It's because back in the 1980s, back in the day when Michael Campy and all these guys wrote Re-Engineering the Corporation and Daryl Connor wrote Change Management or Organizing Change in the Organizations and so on. It seems to me, and Cindy Ronzoni, you've spoken about communication planning and the importance of that standardizing communications in an organization. It seems to me that anytime we interject any new technology in an organization, right, whether it is social media, whether it is an internal intranet, or it's a new procurement system on how you're going to buy things in the organization, you're actually changing the way people do things, whether that's a process or it's a communication thing. It seems to me, my challenge to, my question I'd like to challenge you is that unique to social media, or is that a organizational change management issue?
I think it's a general thing that happened when email was introduced. At the beginning, companies were going, oh my God, we're going to block email because everyone's going to spend all their private time and email all their friends, and then it just became a mainstream thing that just basically is standard now. When companies now decide to block Facebook and Twitter, everyone has one of these on their desk. How are you going to block it? I mean, it's basically you have to kind of, yes, it's guidelines. If you employees understand that the 8 hours a day at their job is to do work, laws and regulations are going to make the change. So I say, if you have a little sign on the door that says, wash your hands, if that's your line of defense, you're really lost. And I think the same thing with social media is to understand, certain departments where it's integrated, like sales, marketing, operations, where I think they have to be given some kind of freedom. And there's other areas where, it's not part of your job. You can do it in your lunch break, and you can do it, afterwards. But the 8 hours will be designed and the job set there. But it's the same thing when email started. Same thing with spamming and emails. What's happening now with Twitter and different other forms. There's going to be ways around it that it's going to evolve. But I think it's the same process when email was introduced and internet in general at the workplace. It's just taking that again as another shift.
So it's not unique to social media.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah. But
I was going to say, I find education the biggest obstacle. I mean, to your point earlier, I really think that you can't have a social media strategy if you don't know how to use Facebook, you don't know the tool, you don't know how to use Twitter. I mean, there's got to be somebody on your team and on your staff that has it. And real estate's the same way. I mean, the most successful agents are in an age demographic that are petrified of these tools, right? And yet they know they have to embrace them, or at least have some kind of strategy, and they're trying to outsource the whole thing to their assistant, right? So it's a challenge, and I spend an immense amount of time just trying to show what the business value is and then teach the skill set so that they can actually have an idea about how this is organizationally different to the entire process, how their business can become more efficient as a result, and how they can benefit from it.
Well, I think one of the things, and actually I'm going to kind of disagree, is that I think that the idea is that social media was brought on by the younger generation, and I don't think it was. Look at the audience in this room. How many of you guys are under the age of 30?
Emotionally, or?
Yeah. Okay. So there's only, by raising hands, there's only about 7 of us that are under the age of 30. Who wants to learn about social media? It's the people who are figuring out the point of it. I mean, why do you think most of the kids that are on Twitter get bored with it so quickly? Because nobody cares about their, pardon my language, crap that they're talking about. It's boring. Nobody wants to know what they're doing with their friends. We want to have these conversations because we want a new way to build networks and build conversations and build an organizational structure that works. And I think that, yes, social media was possibly started by the younger generation. I mean, we all know Mark Zuckerberg was in college when he created Facebook. But I think that the products have been turned over to the 35 to 45 and up culture because that's who's figured out how to use it. And I think that we need to remember that. And if we remember that it isn't about the kids, it isn't about the younger generation, it's about the business generation, then we'll all be able to use the tools way more effectively.